In chaos, there comes opportunity. And right now, we're witnessing a level of economic upheaval that we haven't seen in decades. I'm talking about Trump's tariffs. And today, we'll be diving into the end game behind this controversial move. We'll explore how tariffs, once just a tool for revenue, have evolved into a weapon of economic policy, touching everything from consumer prices and global supply chains to domestic industries like oil, agriculture, and technology. By the end of this video, we'll expose and reveal Trump's endgame to determine if his plan will actually work or if it will backfire with unintended consequences. To understand today's debate on tariffs, we first need to take a journey back in time. Tariffs have been around for centuries. They were once the primary source of revenue for governments. In the early days of the United States, tariffs on imported goods funded much of the federal budget. But over time, economies evolved, and so did the complexity of tariffs and trade policies. In the 19th century, tariffs were used not only to raise revenue, but also to protect new domestic industries from foreign competition. Fast forward to the 20th century, and you'll see that tariffs took on additional roles, influencing international relations and sometimes even contributing to trade wars. However, the underlying concept remained the same. By taxing imports, governments aim to bolster domestic production. Now let's consider a crucial shift in our economic landscape. Over the past few decades, the United States has transitioned from a manufacturing powerhouse to a predominantly service-based economy. And while this shift has driven growth in sectors like finance, healthcare, and information technology, it's also led to what many describe as a hollowing out of our production base. As American manufacturing declined, our reliance on global supply chains grew, and we began depending on adversaries and foreign entities for critical components in our crucial industries. So how does historical context play into the current debate over tariffs, especially those imposed by President Trump? Can these tariffs actually restore American manufacturing, or do they risk further complicating an already intertwined global economy? At first glance, tariffs might seem straightforward. They're a simple tax on imported goods, but in reality, they're incredibly complex. Tariffs don't just affect the products being imported, they ripple through the entire economy. When a government imposes tariffs, it sets off a chain reaction that can affect production costs, consumer prices, and even international diplomatic relations. Imagine throwing a stone in a pond, and the initial splash is just the beginning. The ripples spread out, touching every corner of the water. Tariffs work much in the same way. They can protect domestic jobs in certain industries, but they can also lead to higher costs for businesses that rely on imported components, which in turn may pass those costs on to consumers. And as we'll see later, this impact is not limited to a single sector. It's felt across the entire economy. The new Trump tariffs that have been announced and implemented have an aim of protecting American industries and reducing the trade deficit. These tariffs have sparked fierce debates, both domestically and internationally. But what do they really mean for the average American and for America's economic future? First off, let's talk about you, the consumer. One of the immediate effects of tariffs is ultimately seen in the prices you pay at the store. When government imposes a tariff on imported goods, companies that rely on those imports often face higher costs. And then guess what? These costs are sometimes, most of the times, passed along to consumers in the form of higher prices at the store. For example, everyday items such as electronics, clothing, even certain food products, if a company is forced to pay a tariff on key components from overseas, they might raise the price of the final product to maintain their profit margins. This means while tariffs might protect domestic producers in the short term, consumers can end up paying more at the checkout. But it's not all doom and gloom. There's another side to the story, one that involves potential boosts in domestic production. In theory, if tariffs make imported goods more expensive, American-made products might be more competitive. This could spur increased demand for domestically produced goods and even create new jobs. However, this balance is delicate, and the impact on consumers largely depends on how well industries can adapt to the new economic environment. And here's the key question to consider. Is the potential benefit of increased domestic production worth the immediate cost to consumers? This is a debate that economists have engaged in for years, and we'll explore more angles of this debate as we move forward in the video. But now let's shift our focus to another critical aspect, the revenue generation. Tariffs are essentially taxes on imports, and the revenue generated from these tariffs can be significant. One argument in favor of tariffs is that they could offset the federal deficit, a deficit that's been a point of concern for many years. Supporters of tariffs argue that by increasing government revenue through these taxes, we could reduce the need for borrowing and lower the national debt. In an ideal scenario, the additional revenue could be used to invest in infrastructure, education, or even reduce corporate taxes or income tax. This fiscal boost is often cited as a key benefit of Trump's tariff policies. However, it's important to note that the actual fiscal impact of tariffs is far from straightforward. The revenue generated depends on various factors, including how much trade is affected by the tariffs and how businesses and consumers adjust to the changes. If tariffs lead to a significant reduction in imports, the overall revenue might not be as high as anticipated. Moreover, retaliatory tariffs from other countries could further complicate matters, potentially reducing overall trade and revenue. So while the idea of using tariffs to help offset the federal deficit is appealing, the reality is it's going to be complex. The next time you see a headline touting increased government revenue from tariffs, remember that the numbers are influenced by a web of economic interactions that extend far beyond a simple tax increase. Now let's add another layer to the discussion: how tariffs might influence monetary policy and our long-term economic outlook. Tariffs, by their very nature, can slow down economic activity. If higher import costs lead to reduced consumer spending and business investment, this economic slowdown could eventually prompt the Federal Reserve to continue reducing interest rates to stimulate growth. On the flip side, there's an interesting dynamic on financial markets. As governments collect more revenue from tariffs, it could help shrink our federal deficit. With a lower deficit, investors might see the U.S. government bonds as less risky. And this increased confidence could drive down long-term interest rates. Lower long-end rates might make refinancing the existing debt cheaper, which in the long run can help stabilize or even reduce overall borrowing costs for the government. Now, the elephant in the room that a lot of people might be wondering is, what does this mean for inflation? In the short term, tariffs can be inflationary since the increased costs on imports often translates into higher prices for consumers. However, many economists argue that this inflationary impact could be transitory since it's a one-time change in price. As the market adjusts, and if the tariffs continue to contribute to a smaller deficit, allowing governments to lower income and corporate taxes, the long-term effects could actually be deflationary. Lower taxes could not only help consumers, but also provide investors with a stronger incentive to invest capital in America, further fueling economic growth. And tariffs are often looked at as a consumption tax, so that would put the choice back with the consumers to decide which products they want to consume, while their overall lower taxes could help them spend the money in the places they find more valuable. In essence, while tariffs may initially stir up inflation, the long-term benefits could include a healthier fiscal position and lowering borrowing costs. And this brings us back to the central question: can tariffs save America, like Trump is saying? Or are they a band-aid solution that might create more long-term problems than they solve? It's a debate that doesn't have an easy answer, but one thing is clear: understanding the full picture is essential if we're going to make informed decisions about our economic future. So let's zoom in on the tariffs introduced during Trump's last presidency. These policies were framed as a way to rebalance trade relationships and to bring manufacturing back to America. The rhetoric was powerful, promising job creation, enhanced national security, and a more favorable balance of trade. But did they deliver on those promises? Critics argue that while Trump's tariffs did create some short-term benefits for certain domestic industries, the overall impact on the economy was mixed. In some cases, the increased costs for consumers and businesses, coupled with retaliatory tariffs from other nations, undermine the intended benefits. But that's like every policy decision. It comes with trade-offs, and tariffs are no exception. The potential benefits of tariffs, such as increased domestic production, job creation, and additional government revenue, must be balanced against the potential costs: higher consumer prices, disrupted supply chains, and the risk of international retaliation. But this brings us to the final question: what's Trump's endgame with these tariffs? When you peel back the layers, the policy appears to serve multiple interconnected objectives, both short and long term. On one level, the tariffs could be a bold attempt to protect domestic industries and counteract what's seen as decades of economic neglect. By imposing these tariffs, the Trump administration is aiming to disrupt the status quo, forcing companies to reconsider their dependence on foreign supply chains and encouraging a resurgence in American manufacturing. The idea is to make America great again. And that's not just a narrative in words, but he's wanting to show tangible actions to do it. But there's more to it than just protecting jobs. At its core, the endgame seems to be about reshaping American economic landscape for long-term benefits. By generating additional government revenue through these tariffs, there's the potential to reduce the federal deficit. This in turn could lead to lower long-term interest rates and create room for future fiscal maneuvers, such as reducing income and corporate taxes or giving us more ammo when the next financial crisis comes around. Moreover, and maybe more to the point, this administration appears to be betting on significant recalibration of our global trade relationships. They're designed to force a broader negotiation on trade imbalances and supply chain security. In a world where the U.S. has become increasingly reliant on overseas production, even for critical components, the tariffs are a signal that a change is coming. The endgame: to compel a shift towards a more self-reliant, robust manufacturing base while rebalancing power within the global trading system. We've heard what the critics have to say, yet supporters see this as a necessary jolt, a strategic, if painful, recalibration that could ultimately yield a stronger, more resilient economy. Whether or not these tariffs will achieve that vision remains to be seen. However, one thing is clear. The endgame for Trump's tariffs is not a single, simple goal, but a multi-layered strategy aimed at transforming the economic playing field for decades to come. In the end, I think these tariffs are as much about sending a message as they are about driving immediate economic outcomes. They represent an ambitious, if not contentious, effort to reshape America's future in a rapidly changing global economy. And only time will tell if this bold strategy will pay off, but it certainly sparked a crucial debate about what the best path forward is for American industry, innovation, and economic sovereignty. Until next time.